Yeah, first I wanted to actually clarify when I say like I'm not successful in interview, it's not because I'm shy. It's because I failed most of interviews. I think I failed about like 40 different interviews in Silicon Valley. It's really huge number. Even Google, I failed 3 times in Google.
Hey everyone, I'm starting a new series on my channel called Tech Tracks, where I have the opportunity to talk to really inspirational and unique people in the tech industry and how they got to where they are. And so for this very first Tech Track, I'm talking to my friend and colleague Igor, who has a really broad set of experiences in tech, including as an Android engineer, tech lead, and manager at some of the top companies in the world, including Facebook, Google, Snapchat, and Netflix. And the thing that I find fascinating about Igor is that he's not a child prodigy who has been programming and coding since age 5, and everything has been easy for him. You'll hear from him how he's failed a bunch of times. He started his professional career not as a programmer, but as an auto mechanic in Russia. He transitioned into tech. He spent a few years in South Korea, and then finally he ended up here in Silicon Valley in California. So I hope you enjoy our conversation, and I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from Igor's journey. One more note before we get into it. What you're watching here is the full version of the conversation, which I think is really interesting, and you can really get a full sense of Igor's journey. So I thought we could just get started by maybe talking about where it all started in Russia, right? So maybe you can start talking about how you grew up. How does the education system work in Russia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually very interesting. I think my childhood, I was in pretty poor family, and when we say about poor, it's not level of poor like in America. Poor, I would say we can afford going to McDonald's once a year. That kind of poor.
Mm.
So for me, the richest people in the world were people whose kids could spend their birthday in McDonald's. That's how I thought about the world that days. And I just lived there and didn't have much interest except cars. I always liked cars. So when I was 18, my grandfather gave me a car as a gift. And of course, I wanted to know more about this kind of device. It was from 1979. It was much older than me, that car. And I always need to repair it. And that's how I actually ended up with my first job. I figured out I don't have enough money to repair in body shops, so I need to repair by myself. So I actually found some good body shop. We chatted with that guy. His name was also Igor, I remember, and he agreed to get me as kind of his colleague and learn and teach me to actually repair cars. And that was my first job, and it was quite interesting experience. I realized after like 3 months working there that I probably don't like cars that much as I thought, especially repairing them, especially when you do the whole day. And I remember the biggest frustrations were two. Like first, I'm always dirty. It's impossible to clean up hands after like one day in the cars with all this oil, and gloves don't help. And second, when something is wrong in the car, it's actually really hard to repair. And that time I already was into computer a little bit, even though I didn't like computers that much, but still like I played some games, I did some computer science classes, and I realized in computer many problems when you have with your laptop, you just restart. Like restart button is like magic there. It repairs. It doesn't work with cars. So I realized, okay, maybe I need to double down on my computer skills and actually try something cleaner and easier to handle than cars.
Yeah, and you talked about how, at age 18, you became really interested in cars, and that led you kind of down this path of being an auto mechanic. I think for most people watching, including me, I don't know too much about the education system in Russia. So can you talk about that? Like, did you go to like a technical high school where you learned about engineering, or how does that work? And how about your college experience?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I think the biggest benefit of growing up in Russia is free education. I'm really grateful for this. I was in physical mathematical school, so it was focused on physics and math. It was completely free. It was pretty hard to enter. My mom actually helped me to teach, to find some people who will help me to train, to pass exams for that school. It was just only high school part. And there I realized that actually math is pretty hard, but I can do this. And after this, just because I was pretty good in math and physics and this kind of logic part of the educational area, I decided I will go to mathematical university as well. And it was also free. And it was also like fascinating. If you just think about this, it's one of the top universities in the world, like State University of St. Petersburg. If you think about like world computer science champions, many of them went from that university. Like people there are incredible. It's like top talent in the world, especially in computer science. And I came there just because it was relatively easy for me to pass. I already was pretty good in math. I was not good in history and remembering dates, even though I liked that. So I just went to the path, which was kind of obvious for me, like math, physics. I actually already had enough like diplomas from Olympiads. I even didn't need to pass physics exams. So just go to mathematical cathedral. And yeah, that's, I think, the best part of Russia. And still, in many places in Russia, you get education completely free. Like no bribes, no corruption, nothing to pay. You just go there and do your stuff. And moreover, at least where I was, people who paid for education are like kind of paid and unpaid groups. They ended up, most of them were like excluded out of university. So the professors were really tough on people even who pay money. So at the end of the day, people who graduated were, most of them were completely free students. We even got some money like tuition, but it was maybe like $10 a month, something like this.
Oh, wow.
But still, like it was good.
How did that work with the timeline? So at the point that you entered university, was your auto mechanic career over, or were you doing that on the side? Or what's the timeline between those two?
Yeah, I entered university when I was basically 17. So it was like after first grade, I decided to go into auto mechanics. And after I finished second one, I decided, okay, I should do something that is probably easier to scale. And even though I actually knew that time auto mechanic can earn more money than software engineer, my first salary as software engineer was like $280. So I definitely went not because of salary, just because I wanted to do something a little bit easier and cleaner.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And so let's start transitioning over into tech now, right? So you graduate from this really top university. What are your options looking like in Russia for entering the field of tech? And how did you navigate all the options you had?
Yeah, actually, I was not expecting that I will be ever in computer science world. In my high school, I had computer science classes and my average score was C. I was not good there because I didn't have much interest in this. Like I was okay playing computer games, but like building all this stuff, it was not, I was excited about. I liked like music, I liked a lot of things, which I was not good in, but math was good. So I think a friend of mine went to some company, which is like very small. It was mostly focused on like outsource. And he told me like, hey man, like, let's try. And I came to interview. I remember I was never preparing that time to interview, just like, it was interesting for me to be in the same company where my friend works, and he thought it's pretty clean and nice place. And I remember there was like just kind of mathematical Olympiads kind of questions, how to solve some puzzle problems, and they were relatively easy for me. And I remember it was going pretty well. And then they asked me, okay, what salary you want to have? And I told, I don't care about money. I just want to try your job. And they told, okay, so what's the number? And I told, okay, $200 a month will be enough for me. And they told, no, we can't pay so low. Sorry, the smallest we can pay $280 a month. So that's how we ended up with my first salary, $280 a month as junior software engineer.
And at this point, mentally, were you even thinking about FANG, like, Facebook, Apple, these huge multinational, really profitable American companies, or were they not even on your radar at this point?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine I will ever be a good software engineer. I decided, okay, I passed this interview. Let's try hard. And I think the biggest benefit of my kind of personality, I'm very stubborn in achieving something. So if I go there, I was pretty bad software engineer, right? Like I just started, I was never had much interest. But when I got the task to do something, I remember there was kind of AutoCAD competitor called like TurboCAD at the time. It's an American company, IMSI. And we were outsourcing. So our like St. Petersburg office was doing most of work. It was just in some like old military factory we were doing in interesting environment. But that time I realized that, okay, I can probably do this kind of things. But I never thought that I will be like really good engineer. It's just like I got the task, I tried hard to improve, and there were sometimes moments when I really realized, oh, there's something really great in computer science. For example, I remember DLL. There is like DLL libraries when you can build interface layer of abstraction, and then any different application can work from the same interface and use your library. I remember that time I was excited. Wow, there's something interesting in computer science. There was a few sparks I had back in those days. And I think I never thought about big companies until one exhibition. Like we had that kind of job exhibition. I was coming with my friend, and mostly it was for this friend, but some person approached me and told like, have you ever thought to work in Motorola? I told, no, I never thought. I like my job. It's fine. Like, even though I work in like kind of abandoned factory, that's totally fine. And he told, but think about this, because even I work in Motorola, I like everything, but if someone will approach me, I will still get it as a chance. Like, let's try, like, maybe you will like it. And I couldn't imagine I will work in Motorola. Motorola was something big and great at the time. And okay, I applied. If the person was so nice to me, and I passed Motorola. And I remember how excited I was that I'm now touching something that millions of users, millions of people use around the world. Like, I'm touching real headsets. I remember it was, I think, 2009 or 10 when I first had a business trip to America, to T-Mobile, the big US mobile operator, which we were testing the first Motorola Android headset. And at the time I realized, wow, actually, these people are really doing something great. They just trying to build something for end users. And yeah, that's how I got all this kind of excitement about like big companies and doing something that's real people use.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's really unique about your journey is that you're probably one of the few people who has been around the Android world since, 09 or 08, which is pretty amazing. So we can talk more about that later. I want to talk about, so you're in Russia. The next step in the journey, it sounds like, is you spent some time in South Korea. So I'm wondering, how did that transition happen, and talk about your experience in South Korea.
Yeah, honestly, I liked everything in Motorola. It was everything perfect. We had great people there. We switched from waterfall and Six Sigma process into very fast, agile. I really liked how it went. We were delivering a lot of things. Like, everyone liked me. My first business trip to America, I was very excited. And then Motorola decided to shut down most of offices around the world. That was, I think, end of 2009. And our office was obviously shut down as well. And I remember it all started from like cost cutting. They started to remove like utensils, all the stuff from offices. And then like one day they say, okay, your office will not be there in 3 months. So please find your next job, and we will pay you 6 months. But some people will be paid just 3 months, and they need to work the rest of 3 months. So I was working the last 3 months because I was kind of knew a lot of parts of the team. So I was just transitioning all the knowledge to other offices in Motorola, and I started to go to a lot of interviews. And Motorola helped, at least my manager helped to kind of send my interviews to different companies. And for some reason, it ended up that the company that was mostly interested in me was Samsung Electronics from South Korea. And type of interview was very unique. I think the most unique I ever had in my life. The whole interview was about myself. So basically, I need to speak. I need to create a presentation about my vision, my achievements. I need to wear a good suit, come fully prepared, and just tell how good I am. And yeah, that's kind of the only technical question at the time was, and I already was pretty experienced in Android, at least at that time, it was probably 2010, and I had 2 years of Android experience. And the question was, what's the name of a Java virtual machine in Android? So I knew it's Dalvik. That's the only question I answered. I remember.
Nice.
Yeah, that's how I ended up in South Korea. And I decided maybe I should.
And by the way,
this.
just quick question. I'm curious, your experience at Motorola and at Samsung in South Korea, what was the language of business? Did you talk with all your coworkers in English, or did you pick up any Korean while you were in Korea? How did that work?
That's a good question. In Motorola, the team was based in St. Petersburg, so I was speaking Russian with all my colleagues. But when we had meetings, for example, I was on call for bug reviews. I was speaking English, and my English was not that good. I think it's still not very good, but that time was really bad, especially to understand American accent. It was hard for me. So there were a few very fun stories. For example, one time we discussed like how each team is doing in terms of like on call triage bugs. And I remember we had maybe like 20 bugs in our bucket. And some guy came, and I think he maybe even introduced himself, but I didn't recognize. It was very high level VP or something like, and he asked like my team like why you have like 20 something bugs, and it was very tough to him. I told like, come on man, like see other teams have like 40 and 60, we are doing really good. And he was kind of like pissed off and completely blown away by my words and tone. And I didn't know who is he. I was just pretty direct to him, as I always am. And I remember my boss, she was very good. She actually had really big pushback from the top leadership and like, what's this guy on triage from your team? What's he thinking about himself? And he actually told like, he's not very good in English, so we will sign him for English classes. So it turned out pretty well. Like I was not fired, but at that time I recognized that, yeah, I should be kind of much more careful about my words, my language, because English is, I think, very tricky language. It's kind of the same form. Basically, you always say you, right? You don't have polite form, but it's a little bit different type of tone, a little bit different words. So it's very tricky to recognize that now I'm speaking in more polite form than before. And
you know, we had a discussion a couple of days ago, actually, right, where you talked about how when you came over to the US, one of the things you learned a lot about was soft skills, right? And how do you manage the first impression that you give in an interview? How do you interact with people in a graceful way? And I think that's really interesting because my perception, I've never been to Russia or Korea, but it seems to me like the culture and how you interact with people is so different between, you know, somewhere like St. Petersburg to Seoul, South Korea, to Silicon Valley in California. And so when we do the interview discussion, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on that as well. And then so talking about the Korean experience, right? So you were there for how long? 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years and 2 months.
Got it. And how did you enjoy that time?
Yeah, it's pretty tricky. I would say the culture itself was very, very different from what I ever experienced. Very different. And there definitely were things that I should be grateful for that helped me to understand a lot of things. First of all, I understood that my career in Russia was not as bad. I realized that being equal in terms of opportunity is actually amazing, and not everywhere in the world I will have this kind of benefit. And I experienced that when there is like very big corporations, there is a lot of politics and a lot of things that you actually need to navigate through. And I was completely not ready for this. I was very young and mature and direct person. I don't think I built very good career there, but I think it was very beneficial for me to know like cultural aspects, think about Russians, think about Koreans, think about Western countries. That time I really started to think about differences in terms of how people perceive the world, how people communicate, all this stuff. There were many.
You mentioned that you felt in Russia there was more equal opportunity, at least compared to your experience in Samsung. Like what in particular did you feel like? Is it because of your ethnicity that you might have been passed up, or what exactly did you feel like was unequal about your experience in Samsung?
I would say sometimes my colleagues were pretty direct. So for example, there were tasks that I wanted to take over and told like, okay, this is task, probably I can take this. They can say directly to me sometimes that, oh, you know, sorry, this task is very important for the company. We can't give it to you. And why? Because you're a foreigner, like we can't trust foreigners. So that kind of moments I realized that, yeah, opportunities are probably not equal.
Oh, that's so interesting. And then just out of my own curiosity, you know, there's a Samsung corporate culture, and there's also the Korean society. I'm wondering, the 2 years, I'm sure you spent some time just going out to restaurants or interacting with the local people. How was that experience?
Actually, very interesting. I think Koreans are very good in adapting to other culture. For example, I had friends, and I still communicate with some Korean friends who most of them were in America for some time. It's a very good relationship between America and South Korea. they easily can travel without visas, all this stuff. And I would say these people realize so much about world. They have so much out of box thinking. They know so many problems they have in Korea, so many benefits of like Western society. So I feel people are very different. Some people are, probably it's about many countries, but especially in Korea, I felt like people are very different. Like some people just think that Korea is the best in the world and no one ever, like no foreigner can ever do something good. Sometimes we hear this in America as well last days. But some people are just very open-minded. Like they know everything about the world. They actually understand American culture better than me. They know a lot about Russia. I was surprised, like actually Korean people read Russian books. It's part of their curriculum in the school. So they know like Dostoevsky, Pushkin. I was really blown away that they actually read Russian books. So it's very different. Like they have a very different type of people. And actually interesting that usually Korea is very like kind country. I think the safest country in the world. I never experienced any problems there, but it's the country where I first was exposed to kickboxing. Like my friend actually invited me, and I still have the guy who is actually pretty good in kickboxing. He's now like a Korean level kickboxer. And that guy also like blew me away. Like he's so good and he's so open, and he was in America for I think 10 years. He knows everything about the world. So I would say people are very different. And I just recommend a book called like The Culture Map. I think that's an amazing book which recognize that there are different aspects of culture all over the world. For example, like Eastern Europeans, like we are pretty direct people and all the stuff. But there are about like 7 axes the author puts all the countries on. So when you communicate with a person from another culture, you know approximately what kind of culture environment this person was growing in. Of course, you can't say anything about specific person. We are all unique, but at least some kind of common things that most of people from that particular region have. I think that helps a lot. And as you mentioned, like for soft skills and communication, I think it's important also to recognize that what you say to indirect cultures, for example, you can never say in indirect cultures. So you should be a little, much more careful. Even now in America, for example, if I communicate with Russians, if we use English, we try to keep it like pretty formal and like colleague. Once we switch to Russian, we completely change the topic we are talking, the level of directness, all this stuff. I still feel it's kind of complete, like many difference in terms of like cultures.
Yeah, that's so interesting because what you're saying there actually is that the language in some sense dictates the directness, the formality, like the language is the culture in what you're describing, right? That's really interesting. Okay, cool. So can we talk about now the transition from Korea to the US? So how did that work? How did you decide to leave Samsung, and what was the interview process like to come over to the US?
In Samsung, I actually had contracts, like the contract. It was not like kind of position forever. They usually sign contracts with foreigners. And I remember it was time to expire, and it was kind of like our mutual agreement that we shouldn't probably extend this contract. I think I learned a lot of lessons from Korea. They also learned a lot of lessons from me. As I mentioned, like I was very direct. Everything I didn't like, I was able to speak in front of people, to VP, to any level. So they were also tired of my directness for sure. So that time, I think towards the end of my career in Korea, I realized that I want to try something. I realized that Russia is also one of the countries. It's not just like the country where I was growing, just one of the countries. There's Russia, there's South Korea, there is another world. And of course, I was exposed to a lot of like rumors about Google and other corporations where people like just do the right things. They do 20% of their time for something they're passionate about. So I decided, yeah, I want to try something there. And I started to prepare. And overall, I think last year of my career in Samsung Electronics, I spent a lot of research and interviewing and approaching different companies. And as Russian, I need to pass for H-1B visa. So I need to pass interview, then apply for H-1B visa. Then there's lottery, and many companies just stopped our process once they knew that I need H-1B sponsorship. And it was very direct, like, sorry, we can't support. It's like a lot of risks, a lot of investments. So the first year of my efforts, I failed. I didn't pass enough bar. I think there are a few companies that are really good in terms of like H-1Bs, like Amazon, Microsoft, all those companies that pretty easy for them to actually, they have lawyers, everything. But the problem is that those companies try to get the top talent in their world. So for example, when I was going in Moscow to Microsoft interview, I was not just competing with like normal Microsoft employees. I was competing with top Russian talent that applied for Microsoft. It was like world computer science champions, all the stuff. So the questions I got there were, I think, out of my level. Even now, like I don't think I can meet the bar there. And it was completely different experience going in the same companies in Silicon Valley. It's also very interesting because in Russia, we just don't have enough companies. Like there is not much competition except like foreigners or for foreign companies. So you just outsource for foreign companies or startups, which I actually ended up working in Russia. But startups need a lot of investment, especially like first like 5 to 10 years. And I think that's the biggest problem in Russia. We have very talented people, but we don't have investors that are risky and long-term investors enough to actually invest into high tech. And also, like, how you can invest in high tech if there are so many things that changing every year in Russia, like laws, everything. So definitely that environment overall dictates that the top people need to leave. So that's why I compete with top people in Russia, and it was very, very tough. So I spent actually 2 years trying to pass the interview and clear the bar.
And finally, during the 2-year period, mentally, you were committed to leaving Russia. Is that right? Like you wanted to come to the US for sure, or were you kind of open-minded about if there's a good enough opportunity here in Russia, I might stick around, or maybe go to London or somewhere else? How did you think about where you wanted to end up?
I remember actually when I was even going to South Korea in Samsung Electronics, I know I signed contract for 2 years, but my mental plan was just 3 months. I thought I will give it 3 months and try how it works, knew about the culture, and return back. And then I met their friend who is still like, he lives nearby, probably one of my best friends. And that guy introduced me to the culture, to the uniqueness on the South Korea. We traveled a lot together. We understood so many things. So I mostly was there because I met him. And the same, I had mentality about America. I realized, okay, I need to try. I read so many good things about American culture, especially work culture. I was in business trip, which completely blew my mind. That was like really very interesting experience I never was expecting from America. And also I wanted to try like also 3 months maybe, and then we will see.
Got it. Okay. That's really okay. So you're in Russia preparing for these interviews. What was effective in terms of learning how to interview well? And I think we'll talk again about this topic because I think a lot of people are interested in how you managed to crack the interview at so many of these top companies in Silicon Valley. But during that period in Russia, was there anything in particular that you did that worked really well for you to actually end up coming to the US?
I think the top thing that I did for actually passing interviews is persistence. I was very persistent. I was trying, I was failing, trying. I think that time I maybe failed about like 30 or 40 different interviews. But I was never giving up because I knew like if I give up, there is no chance for me to try in America. So I was very persistent, and I think this is the quality that helped me.
That makes a lot of sense. So where did you actually end up working at, which allowed you to come to the US, and what city was that in?
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. That was a startup called Tango.me. Tango.me, they were first cross-platform video calling application.
Yeah, I may have heard of them. Yeah, they were pretty popular, right? Tango.
Yeah, they actually reached 1 million monthly active users within first week, or 1 million installations within first week.
Wow.
So it was like blown away their success in the beginning. When I joined, they had about like 30 million monthly active users and about 300 million installs, but it was still startup. And that time I looked on like Google Play, this is just startup, has some video calling, and I knew there are many other video calling apps. And like from Russian perspective, I worked already in startup. I realized like, oh, this is so like easy to be closed. Like I was in a Russian startup which was doing much more sophisticated technology and all this stuff, and we were shut down because we didn't have money. So I was thinking like, oh, every day this company will die. I should just go as soon as possible to America, at least to go there before they exist. I didn't realize the level of investment and trust in America is completely different. Like basically it's a lot of expectations from startups in Russia. You should be like top of the world, all this stuff. In America, if you have success already, people believe in you and ready to invest into like 5-10 years. I was not expecting this. So I was very scared, and I decided, okay, I go to America. There I will maybe start interviewing or something, because I don't know what will be future, but I want to try. I want to at least be stable there. And it was Mountain View. It was actually, the office was in Mountain View, and they had a hotel for me for like 3 weeks in the downtown Mountain View. And I think it needed for me 2 weeks. I think after 2 weeks there was like, it was end of September, California weather, Mountain View.
Yeah.
I was very positive. Startup ended up, they have a lot of money. After 2 weeks, I decided I will never return back to Russia. That blown away my mind. I really loved everything I saw around.
Okay, I have to ask. So when you came, what year was that? 2011?
It was 2014.
13. Okay, so 2013, you fly into, I guess, San Jose or San Francisco, and this is your first time in the US. Is that right?
After that business trip, like I had business trip in 2009, and then this one is second in my life.
Yeah. So I have to ask, what were your impressions of Silicon Valley and the culture when you came in 2013 then?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like I checked Google Maps Street View. I remember, realized, okay, I'm actually coming to not high-tech place. I come into some really rural area. It all looks like countryside. Like it's like 2-story houses, and that's like, it doesn't look like cities. It all looks like something that is like full on barns and like small kind of shops, and that's all. And then I arrived there. I didn't have much expectation. I realized, okay, this is not what I expected from like high-tech capital of the world. I realized, oh, actually, this is something about inside, not outside. So I feel people, corporations, housing, everything is all about inside. I don't care how it looks outside. Google headquarters is also like 2 stories, building full of just kind of wood. It's nothing special, but they do like technologies that billions of users use around the world, and they care about this much more than about perception, building like high skyscrapers, all this stuff. And I started to get it. Like 2 weeks was enough for me to actually chat with some people and see, actually, they want to do something good. These people care about doing something good. They don't care about how people perceive them. That kind of things, I think, blow my mind at the time.
Yeah, and I feel like my story is similar. I grew up in Michigan, and I came over here to Stanford for university. And I was also anticipating, when I heard of Silicon Valley growing up, I thought, okay, there are robots everywhere, and self-driving cars and all this. But then when you arrive here, it's just suburbia, right? It's not that special. It doesn't look like that futuristic. So I think I had a very similar experience when I arrived as well.
How much time it was needed for you to realize that there's something special about this?
Yeah, I think so. I arrived at Stanford in 2009. I think very quickly when I arrived and started attending classes and meeting people who were also, like my classmates, then I realized everyone here is thinking about what to build. What can they do to improve their classmates' life, their family's life, like building things was very much in the culture. And that's what I realized, that, this is not so much about like, I'm going to go to work, collect a paycheck and go home. It was much more about, let's build something meaningful. And I think I really imbibed that as well. And that's actually kind of what led me to, so like similar to you, starting a career in Silicon Valley, building this YouTube channel, all that, to try and to do something more beyond just, the 9-to-5 job.
Trying to make the world a better place, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the tagline of Silicon Valley, right? Some people do it better than others, but okay, great. So you're in Mountain View. You decided that, this is you're happy here. You like the weather, the nature, everything, the people. What's your next move after you've been here for a few weeks at Tango?
Yeah, I remember some companies started to approach me as soon as I changed my LinkedIn profile to like Silicon Valley Mountain View software engineer. I started like to get so much attention I never had in my world. And actually both like Samsung Electronics and Tenga.me, they all found me on LinkedIn. But it was, like, okay, one company once a month approached me, so I always reply to them. And then it started like a few companies a day. And I was like blown away. Wow, something is going on there. People are really searching for talent. And I remember one of the companies was Netflix. And I knew, okay, it's another startup. Like, okay, they do online streaming. probably I don't want to change one startup to another. So I told like, sorry, I'm not interested in your career opportunity. And then I remember I was chatting with some Russian friend. There was actually many Russians in that Tangami startup. They were pretty smart how to hire like talent around the world. And I was like, yeah, there was some company like Netflix approaching me. They told, Netflix, come on, this is like top company in the world, all this stuff. And I thought, okay, maybe I should think something about more serious. So after a few months, I think there was some changes in my company. We had some problems with where we go, with direction. And I realized my salary was pretty small. My salary was $100,000 that time a year. And I realized it's not that much for Silicon Valley. I had also grant like $30,000 like grant for 4 years. And I remember like
That's
like
the equity grant that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, equity grant.
Okay.
Options,
and that, so
yeah.
Just for people who may not be aware, correct me if I'm wrong, that was $30,000 divided up into 4 years. Is that right? So every year you get a fraction of that.
Yeah, and what's interesting, it was paper money. In reality, there was no money. It was just theoretical money. If we become public or someone acquire us, then you can sell part of the grant that was vested based on that evaluation. And I remember the head of finance at that time was very, very kind of charismatic and amazing guy. So he was making me believe that this $30,000 actually cost a lot of money. In reality, they never costed anything. But anyway, I started to realize like it's hard to actually afford like apartments, all the stuff, housing for like $100,000 a year. And I started to kind of, see what I can do. Like, how about interviewing in Silicon Valley? I never tried this before. And I replied to Netflix, okay, maybe I'm ready to try. And I remember they were playing really hard. They told like, no, we don't have opportunities at that moment now. And I realized, okay, maybe this company worth something if they are so like easy to reject.
Yeah.
So it was long story. It was, I think I had the interview with Netflix in 6 months after this. They approached me again and told, okay, now we have some opportunity for you, so let's try. So it was back and forth.
Were you like single-minded in pursuing Netflix, or were you kind of pursuing 4 or 5 different companies at the same time and seeing what stuck, or were you only really focused on Netflix at this point?
Yeah, I think there was one time in my company when CEO came back from his business trip from China, and he actually had a big speech in front of our whole startup and told how he was excited going to Alibaba office at like 7 p.m. on Saturday. They all were working until like, I think 60 or 70% were working there on Saturday, 7 p.m. and how excited it was. And I felt, there's something wrong there. It's not why I came to America. I want like a little bit different culture and attitude. And especially he was trying to push people to go to Saturday, every second Saturday to go to work, even if we already cleared up our stack of tasks. So it was not kind of inspirational. It's just like, okay, you must go there and just sit there. And that time I realized, okay, they probably are not very kind of careful about their talent and keeping people, and probably they feel they can easily replace us. So I realized, okay, it's not safe. And it's not the culture I wanted to try. So I started to interview in many companies. So I interviewed, I think, I'm not very good in interviewing, honestly speaking. I'm become too nervous, like, and too anxious. And I think I deliver much worse that I can. And that time, I think I tried like maybe 10 different companies and get like 3 offers. It was another startup, it was LinkedIn, and it was Netflix. So.
Okay, cool. So I want to fast forward a little bit. So you spent a few years at Netflix, right? And then I think you went to Google, and then you spent some time at Snapchat. And then, you also, of course, have experience at Facebook. So clearly you're doing something right. I mean, you mentioned that you're not good at interviews, but it seems like based on your track record, you're actually really, really good. So, I mean, you figured something out, which is working. And I think for a lot of people watching, it would be a dream come true to work at any one of the companies that you've worked at. So can you talk about, you mentioned persistence earlier. Can you talk more about what has really worked for you in terms of interviewing?
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects of interviewing. I would say persistence is the most important, I think, especially in America. When I'm speaking, I feel to pass interview in America, persistent could be the most important quality because it's all predictable. In Russia, went to many interviews and I always was not expecting what they will ask me. Sometimes they ask me like, okay, what's the difference between like templates and generics? And I knew both Java and C++, but not the first that comes to my mind to answer this question. I was starting to think about like different parts. And I remember the interviewer told me, you actually have 10 seconds. If you don't answer this question for 10 seconds, you're not senior engineer. And I thought, okay, that's something I was not expecting in the interview. So that kind of questions were like just like killing me. Like sometimes they come with some crazy thing about like assembler or some other stuff. In America, it's all pretty, at least in Silicon Valley, it's all pretty expected. Like there is cracking the coding interview book, which is like thing like Bible of interviewing. So every time I had new rounds of interviewing in my life, I was always reading this book from the beginning to end. That's kind of the basement. It tells what to expect there, what are potential rounds, because usually there are three most important things to kind of beat an interview. First one is cultural fit. Not all companies do this, but in many companies, they at least try to find out if you're good culture fit. So I recommend watching some CEO videos about this, of that particular company, because usually CEOs, people who share about their mission, about their values of the companies, and they probably expect every candidate to share the same vision or mission, especially like companies that are successful, for example, like Netflix. If you don't have Netflix account, if you don't like Netflix, if you don't use Netflix, I don't think you will ever be able to get offer from them. One of the questions they can ask, like, what do you think you want to improve in Netflix? What things are going well, what not? And they really want people who are passionate about the company. And I think most of successful companies are like this. They realize like they can't attract best of you by just money. It's impossible. Like everyone can overbid in terms of money. They want to attract full of you. They want to attract your passion, your time, your kind of desire to learn all this stuff.
And is that something that you think is unique to Silicon Valley and in this area, or did you find that in Russia or Korea or other places that you might have interviewed?
Good point. Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is pretty unique. First of all, like the level of success, I think there's like the most successful companies in IT world are in Silicon Valley, especially the headquarters. And yeah, probably this one. And also like, I think this is a kind of new generation, like new trend of companies like Airbnb, Uber, Lyft. They all kind of were born relatively new. And I think this is kind of new wave when people think we should make the world a better place. We need people who are passionate about improving themselves, improving the company, the world. And they realize that if they need people who just execute, they just outsource that part, right? But they can't outsource something that is really about like passion driving something. So yeah, you're right. I think this kind of probably Silicon Valley and maybe a few other places in the world where the more successful companies have their headquarters and want people to actually help them to grow and move somewhere.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that it sounds like that's actually a big part of your interview process as well. Like you said, that's the first thing that they actually trying to look for is culture. And so you were mentioning a couple others as well.
Yeah, so like soft skill, like even when there's like ice breaking in most of interviews, I think if interview is pretty good, he or she shouldn't start from just like, okay, let's jump in the questions. There's an important part of American culture is about ice breaking. So it's a lot about finding each other, like connection, what are similarities in people, like hobbies or something. And this important part, that's actually, I think cracking the coding interview basically asks about this round or this part of interviews. Do I want to have a beer with this person, right? Is there anything in common that we just enjoy? Because going to work, and especially after COVID, right, it's a lot of communication with people. And people want to hire people they like to work with. So I would say all the parts of interview is important. When you speak with HR, when you speak first like 5-10 minutes with the person, it could sound it's not technical, but it's all about fit. Cultural fit, personal fit, your mission, your values. So that's one very important part. Second part is about resolving the coding questions, basically. And yeah, cracking the coding interview had, I think, like 100 questions. I solve them every time I prepare for interviews. So overall, I think I solved all of them maybe 9 or 10 times in my life. I always forget the best solutions, so I write by myself and then double check that it was the most optimal solution or not. And there are really good websites like LeetCode. I like also interviewbeat.com, which is free. And there are many sites that you can just train. I think this is important. Like if you want to pass coding interview, you need to train, because most of tasks is really hard to meet such kind of tasks in the real kind of work environment. They're very specific. The problems are kind of focused on particular kind of hack or particular kind of interesting idea that I think maybe there are a few inventors in the world that can easily get this idea, but most of people, I think, or at least like people like me, they need definitely know these ideas and learn and work hard to actually solve these kind of tasks, understand what the best algorithm, what the best data structure for this particular problem and all this stuff. And the third part is only if you go into like senior positions, it's about architecture. But senior position starts from, in some companies, this entry level. For example, Netflix never hires non-senior people. So if you want to go to Netflix, you should definitely pass architecture round as well. And architecture round, I think this is much more applicable to real world. They want to see how this good scalable design you can build. How can you see the high level picture of the problem? Usually you don't write any code there. You just like say about like, okay, there is my UML diagram. This is how different components will interact with each other. There is how I will solve this particular issue. They also expect you from to have a lot of like clarification questions, to focus on particular problems, get all the requirements. You probably can find a lot of preparation for architecture round of interview in the internet. But I think this is 3 main aspects.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good breakdown of how to think about interviews. There's cultural fit, the coding or technical aspect, and then the architecture aspect. I'm wondering, you've done so many interviews, you worked at so many companies. How much correlation is there between good interview performance and good on the job performance? I'm wondering, because there's a common critique is like, you have to be tooled for an interview. It's like a very distinct skill, which oftentimes you don't exercise on the job. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to actually evaluate person to be successful in the company, because there's so many aspects that you need. You need to be great, like team player. You need to have really good personality. You need to focus on the right things. You need to have communication skills, like of course, like skills to solve the problems, find solutions, work independently. There's so many things that almost impossible to check. So I think most of companies came into this kind of realization that they can only check this subset of kind of important personalities. And one part is coding questions. And I think there are a lot of discussion on the internet, like they're completely isolated from real world problems. You will never solve this in your own environment, all this stuff. And this is probably true, but it also checks if you have ability to solve hard kind of problems in computer science world. Some people solve this because they're genius. Some people solve because they're persistent and they can learn and they deal with this. And probably will be the same in your work. Like I probably don't solve many questions by myself. I search internet, I try different prototypes, and then I come to solution. But it helps that, do I have enough persistence to solve the problem, or am I genius enough to solve the problem? And then when about culture fit, they basically also want to check if you just go to a company and just work for money, and then every time some companies give you more money, you will switch. Will you try to do only good job that looks outside good, or will you really try to do the best, even if something no one can check? So I think they check a few aspects, but for example, teamwork, they can never check if you're a good team player or not. And even with coding questions, like sometimes it's just luck, right? Sometimes you could be asked the same question that you were repeating. Maybe you just remember those stuff and you wrote good. But so of course it's not like one-to-one comparison. And people who are successful in interviews, sometimes they're not good team players, for example. They couldn't be successful in the job, and vice versa. So I would say it's completely two kind of parts of success: being successful in interview, which I feel I'm not as good in, and being successful in actually at work. I think I am much better in that actual area, honestly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there have been so many examples of people who do so well in the interview but then when they actually get on the job, right, they struggle a lot because you're now entering into a huge code base. There's a lot of people who have a lot of context information. So that definitely exercises a very different kind of skill. So I think 100% agree with you there. I want to talk about your time at these different companies, like these huge, very wildly popular, wildly successful companies, Netflix, Google, Snap, Facebook. I'm wondering how, I guess two questions. Number one, can you talk about the culture at each of these companies? What did you like or maybe what you didn't like? And also, I'm wondering, how did you decide the right time to leave one company and go to this how did you decide to interview or go to another company?
Yeah, first I want to actually clarify when I say like I'm not successful in interview, it's not because I'm shy. It's because I failed most of the interviews. I think I failed about like 40 different interviews in Silicon Valley. It's really huge number. Even Google, I failed 3 times in Google. And it's important also to remember that if you fail interview, it's just like that time was, you didn't say good things, expectations were too high, you didn't know this area or something like this. It just doesn't mean like there is not good fit between you and the company, as we discussed, right? It just means that particular day you failed or company failed to evaluate you good. So it shouldn't be signal for you, okay, I give up on this company. It shouldn't be just signal of you what you did wrong. And I was always like keeping notes for myself, okay, what I can do better next time I interview to the same company, the same interviewers for the same tasks. I think that's very important. So yeah, persistence is very good. So your question was about them.
Your experience at the different companies and what you liked or didn't like, and also how did you decide to leave that company?
Yeah, so experience is Netflix. I think Netflix is a very special company. I really like the culture. They say we are not a family, we are a professional football team. So basically they try to hire top talent from the world, put them in the correct spot, remove all bureaucracy, all roadblocks. They do everything for you. You will get the top salary in the world. You will get all the benefits. You will have no like meetings, all this stuff, everything for you to be really successful in this world. So as engineer, I was the most successful, I think the most happy in my entire life as engineer. I really loved there. Everything was perfect. But it's also another side of this. It means they're not the family, right? They're a professional football team. After some time, I realized that my passion goes out of computer science more into like leading people. And I realized like I read books about psychology. I read books about leadership. I like in my job when I communicate with our end users during research tours, when I communicate with XFN partners like design, I realized like my true passion is about people. And I invest a lot of my time learning about people. And it means that in 5 to 10 years, I will be pretty bad software engineer if I continue this track, comparing to my colleagues who listen podcasts about Android, who read books about Android, and I stopped doing this. When you stop developing yourself in this area, I think it's important to realize you will be much worse in this area in a few years, because especially like Android and all these like modern technologies, you cannot be great forever. When you stop learning new things, you become worse each day. So I realized, yeah, if my passion is there, I should follow my passion. And I also read about a lot of books that you can successful only where is your passion. And I definitely was not a well-shaped manager at that time. As I told, like I think I still too direct sometimes. And I have accent, I have a lot of like things. So Netflix is not the company that will invest into manager if they know that this manager is kind of risky bet. I don't say they don't promote the manager, they do promote. And even in my team, the manager was promoted, but this was amazing guy. He had great communication skills. He had great personality, everything. Like there was almost zero risk for Netflix to promote this person. It's not about Igor going from Russia with weird accent, not understanding full American culture, with very like direct person. So I understand like in Silicon Valley, there are companies that are family kind of and not family. Netflix was not family. It was greatest engineer, but they will never help goalkeeper to become forward. It's not in their interest unless goalkeeper already has very good like kicking skills, all this stuff. So I realized, okay, I need to try a company that will follow my passion and help me to grow into management. And Google was in horizon. I think by that time I already failed maybe 2 times in Google. One time in Russia, I was completely blown away. The questions were kind of like introduce new type of tree for this particular type of problem. So like kind of think about B star tree, but you need to introduce this kind of thing. The questions were like really for top computer science genius in the world, I think. Google here was much more like cracking the coding interview kind of style interview, but I still failed. I don't remember. Probably there was like I think they were on the edge, so I was much closer at least. I think in Russia they gave me only 2 or 3 rounds. They told, okay, that's fine, like go home. You're not good fit. In Silicon Valley, I had much. I think I had all the 5 rounds. So in Google, I realized that they want to grow people, and they told me all about like ladders, about performance review. In Netflix, there is even no performance review. The performance review in Netflix is just at the end of the year, you sit with your manager, and your manager tells you, like you did a really good job. Your salary next year will be like $1,000 more, something like this. $100,000 more, something like this. So it's like really good, like, and no bureaucracy. Don't fill out all these forms, all this stuff. But from other perspective, they are not very much interested in what you want to do, right? If you want to grow into management, they can help, but they will not invest into you. It's not the family, right? You should recognize this. And Google, they will always ask you to fill out the form. You can even put checkbox that you say, I am ready for promotion. So you basically nominate yourself for promotion in Google. And that was all very exciting. Like all my discussions with HR told me, okay, this is the right company. It's not just what I read in the books, but it's also, they want to grow me, whatever passion I have. So I joined Google. I had a huge cut on my total compensation, I think 30% or even more. But I realized like I should follow my passion. It's not about money, it's about my passion. And what ended up in Google, I think for me, I think Google is a very big company, like every team is specific. But at least in my team, I realized that everything is much slower than I expected. I think I am like very ambitious person. I really want to work hard and see results fast. And even the coding part of Google was very slow. At least from what I saw from my team. Again, I think many other teams could be different, but what I saw when I do like any changes in the code base, usually if I touch any file in Google, each file has its own owner. So I can't just like have my team approve my changes. It's usually external teams. It could be one person dedicated for this particular file. This person could be busy. Your changes are not top priority for this person. So he can say like, okay, maybe I will take a look next week, or maybe tomorrow you will ping this person. This person can forget. The person can ask you some question, just disappear, go to PTO or something like this. So in general, for me, code review in Google took 1 week, and I was pissed off with this. Like I really was pissed off. I was writing a lot of code, but I couldn't get it committed. And I realized like, oh, it actually frustrated me a lot. And I was ready to work hard, to do a lot of things, but I was not prepared to actually see it and spend time in these kind of discussions like, oh, how we do this, how we do this. And another thing that I think was frustrating for me in Google was their kind of approach. This is the way we do in Google. I never saw this in other companies. Basically, at that time I had a lot of Android experience. I think I had about maybe seven years of Android. I knew a lot about Android, and I did my own like hobby application for Android. And I remember when there was code review, some engineers told me like, oh, this is not the way we do in Google. And that kind of frustrates me. Like, why you say about Google, there's like industry, right? And industry already knows what the best to do in Android for this particular kind of type of problem. And I was never able to kind of fully commit to doing something just because they do this. I was always challenging people, because I think many people don't realize that Android, that was some small startup that Google acquired a long time ago, and Google like owns Android still, but the Android team in Google is completely separate from all other teams in Google. There's not much transfer, knowledge exchange, except there is sometimes internal internal presentations and internal conferences, but it's very similar to what you can see publicly in YouTube about like Android, all the stuff. The same engineers, top stars in Android, they present there, but it's not like these top stars work across whole Google. So there are many things in Google that just people with high level, they come start doing Android, and they already have high level. They're already like very like senior engineers, but they're not senior in Android. And they are very confident. They know what to do. They know how Google does this. And that kind of was, I think, also very high level frustration for me, that they're not ready to debate and discuss like why my solution was not perfect. No, my solution was bad because it's not the way they do in Google. But Google is not the world. Like, I feel it's also about a little bit inbox thinking that like, okay, Google is the world. They do all the best. But if you just look into the products, they have amazing products like YouTube, like Google Maps, a lot of great products, but they also have like many messenger apps, for example, that no one uses, right? And they are not probably the best in the world. So sometimes people don't realize that there is something to learn about. And I think this paradigm shift happened to me in South Korea. I realized like everything I was taught in Russia, it was not the truth. It was just one point of view, right? Russian culture, Russian attitude towards people, Russian thinking about the world is just point of view. In Korea, I had opposite point of view about everything. And it's also point of view. And the same about like everything from software engineering to the culture. Even like the toughest questions in Android and toughest tasks, it's all about point of view. There will be like 20 different opinions about any architecture, and probably all of them will have correct and non-correct points. And also all the point, especially about architecture, is correct with the amount of knowledge you know about at this particular moment. In 1 year, usually most of great architectures are not that good anymore, because there were a lot of changes in product requirements that completely changed the kind of architecture. And you look at this code that was looking that great in design review, now it's spaghetti because there were so many things to fix there, right?
Totally.
And I think being more open to other points of view, that's what I was missing in Google. That was my biggest struggle.
I'm wondering about that. That's a really good point. Like what I'm hearing is you basically are describing there's some bureaucracy at Google. There's some rigid structure around how they want to go about doing either architecture or coding. And that was frustrating because you thought you had an equally valid idea, but it just didn't jive with their perception. So I can understand that frustration pretty well. Looking back at it, was there anything that you could have done around like either communicating ahead of time with the influential people in the organization, or maybe like adapting some of their ideas? Like, is it something that you could have done on your end in order to lessen that frustration? Or do you think there was a complete mismatch in how you perceived the code and how they perceived it?
Yeah, that question is amazing. Yeah, definitely. I think only now I realizing that I think the most important of people, of every person, one of the most things, they want to be heard and be understood. And basically, it's not just about exchanging ideas. It's also about respecting each other, right? And probably if I demonstrate more respect to people that time in Google and just first ask about their ideas, try to demonstrate that I really care about how they do in Google, why they do this, probably I would be much more I will have much less troubles committing my code. You're right. It's definitely something really good learning thing for me as well.
Yeah, and that's such a good, because I feel like our interaction at Facebook, I feel like you're so well regarded, so well liked. And I can tell that, all these prior experiences coming from Russia, where it's a very different culture, and then being molded by all these companies here in Silicon Valley, I feel like you've really taken these learnings, and I feel like it's valuable that you're able to share them here. So that's amazing. Okay, so that's Google. That's really interesting to hear about how Google operates. And how did you think about, it sounds like that's kind of what led you to maybe start interviewing. And then can you talk about that experience and how you ended up at Snapchat?
Yeah, I was still pretty committed to Google, and I was kind of unhappy there, but I was trying. And also I couldn't say it's just about Google. It's more about my team, right? Maybe there are much better teams and completely different. I'm sure there are different teams with different culture. So I think that was very interesting approach. It was some Russian woman from Snapchat who approached me in very polite way with some kind of, I think she had this kind of personal attitude towards hiring people. She asked me something about like, how do I feel in America? And I felt like this company is taking hiring process in a very unique way. I never experienced it. It was wrote in Russian language with touch points about my career and questions. So I was just decided, okay, maybe I should try to interview in this company. I never thought I will ever work in Snapchat, because I remember they first approached me back in 2013. I was stupid enough to even not interview them that time. Probably I don't need to work anymore if I agreed. So in 2013, I installed their app, and it was so hard for me to use. I realized that this is some like unlucky startup. It's like it will be never successful. Like it's impossible to use this.
And actually, just real quick, I want to make sure that people are following along. So the way what Igor is describing is that, if he had joined Snapchat in 2013, he would have been given some equity, like some ownership in the company. And back then, the valuation of Snapchat, I forget exactly how much it was, but it was in the low billions, right? It was very small. And now it's more than 10x that valuation. So I think that's kind of what you're describing, right? It's like that would have been a pretty financially lucrative move if you had joined Snapchat that early.
Yeah, it's first about money and second about influence. If you join a successful company on the early stages, you will be the person who actually set the rules, the culture, the quality of the code base. You will influence a lot. The problem is that there is small, like very tiny percentage of companies who ever become Snapchat or Netflix. Most of startups fail within like first 5 years. Most of those startups who didn't fail within the first 5 years, they failed in the next 5 years. So it's almost impossible to join the company like Snapchat. And of course, I was approached by many startups. It's not just Snapchat. And most of startups that I was approached that time, you will never hear anymore. They don't exist. But it was just one bet that, if I accept, I will get a lot of money and a lot of influence in that company, right? If I join, if I do the right thing, I can actually dictate how Snapchat does like Android application, for example. And I know people who actually work there for a long time. They're amazing people and really successful. And it's also about like driving the thing they're passionate about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
But yeah, so you're talking about the Snapchat process and how you had this interaction that really compelled you to learn more about it.
Yeah, everything was very unique about Snapchat. I really wanted to participate in that journey. Like the hiring process of Snapchat at that time, it was journey. It was 2000, I think, 16 or 17. Basically, after first round, I just spoke about myself, everything liked, and I realized actually I can help this company a lot, because the question I was asked were very trivial for me, and I thought, okay, maybe this company will benefit from my knowledge, so I will help them. So I answered questions. I told like any problems you have, I can help with those problems. And then they invited me to go to Santa Monica, their headquarters. And I remember also approach was very unique. They told like, oh, do you have family? We can fly your family as well. We can make kind of tour for them. I read, wow, interesting. No one ever mentioned this. So all this was unique. And my interview round was in their Santa Monica apartments, just in front of the beach and the ocean. So I saw from my interview window the ocean. And also I was never thinking that I will join Snapchat even that time. I was thinking, interesting company. Everything is very interesting. So let me just demonstrate how good I am. So I demonstrated. I actually was not nervous at all, because I came there to help company, to give them good answers to their changing problems that they gave to me. And they respected this. I was surprised like how many good words they told about me. And they gave me this opportunity to feel that I will be important in this company, that I will make this company better. And I think that was very important part of their round. And the HR person, that another HR person, I think his name was Kevin. He was also amazing. Like everything he did was just like touched my heart, basically. Wow. So I realized that maybe Google doesn't respect me that much. They don't realize how good I am. I should go to the company that respects me and where I will really make the world a better place. That's how I ended up in Snapchat.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And I feel like it sounds to me like they really nailed down the recruiting and how to attract you. Like they flew you down, invited your whole family, you were by the beach. And I feel like for people who are in Northern California, which is where we are right now, going to the LA area where Santa Monica is and seeing how beautiful it is, how warm it is, I think that actually attracts a lot of people. So it seems like end to end, they had a really amazing experience. So how was your experience at Snapchat?
Yeah, Snapchat was also very unique kind of culture. It was, I would say, if Google was kind of family, a little bit slow family, but family. Netflix was professional football team. Snapchat was chaos that time. That's what I felt. Like within 1 year, I was working there. I think I was working 1 year, 1 month. Many engineers that I knew left. I think most of the engineers I knew left. My director was fired. My manager was fired. So many things happened within 1 year compared to Google, where nothing was happening within the same 1 year. It's kind of also, it was very unique environment, but I was also not sure what will happen next. And stock also plumbed down 3x. Stock is kind of big part of the compensation, more than your base salary in Silicon Valley. So everything was telling me that we don't know what will be in future. And that reminded me like my startup days when I also don't know like will this startup exist or not. And that made me a little bit more open to accept calls. I also was not searching, but I remember also like another recruiter approached me, and Facebook was a company that already failed one time, and they approached me at that time, and okay, I decided I will try again. So it was just another kind of opportunity that I was a little bit like nervous. What will I get next year in this company? Will I be fired? Will my new manager be fired? Will be the whole stock and company disappear? So I think that biggest problem. And also, I think, honestly speaking, there was also not sure that our team was respected. Like I was driving the whole playback and navigation framework team, and I didn't feel that the amount of respect and importance in the company was correlated with the amount of technical changes and importance of the real product. Right. I think that was also the problem. We had troubles to get like headcount, all the stuff for our team, and that also kind of led my. And I also remember like I remember I was interviewing in WhatsApp. It was 2013, I think, and Brian Acton, one of the founders of startup of WhatsApp. I remember I asked him, what will you advise to yourself when you are like my age? And he told, actually, don't stay in the company when it's going down. And he was basically talking about his experience in Yahoo. He was in Yahoo for a very long time. And looking back from his like a mature age, he realized that a lot of years we just lost. He was just sitting in comfort zone and not learning new things. And that's what was probably the biggest, I think, driver. I think there are three probably things that you should think when you think leave or not leave. First, do you enjoy your daily work? Like, is it something that you wake up and think, okay, today is Monday, I'm so happy. Maybe I'm exaggerated. You don't need to be so happy, but at least you should have something excited going for that week. If I realize, okay, this is Monday again, my team is not respected, I need to do triage bugs and no one is interested in this and all this stuff, and it's just Monday, then we'll be Tuesday, Wednesday. This is like first factor. I was probably not excited anymore, and I didn't feel much respect, all this stuff. So enjoying work, I think, is very important correlation. And I would never be very successful in the company that I'm not enjoying much working in. I think second part is, do I learn new things, right? It's very important to ask yourself question like, am I becoming a better person, better engineer, better manager, or anyone you are in this company? Like if you just sit in comfort zone, you're doing good job, you have good salary, but you're not growing, that probably means that could be not the right thing. So if you don't enjoy and you don't grow, that's the question, like maybe you should find other opportunity. And I think that's an important thing to realize. And also third thing is like, think about future, like in 5 years, for example, what's your goal to be in 5 years? Mm-hmm. Do you follow that kind of path you have during these 5 years? And in Snapchat, that was a good example that I couldn't have any path. Like everything was just like, people are leaving, people are fired. I couldn't make my path because there were so many external circumstances. So that's what made me open to actually consider other opportunities.
I feel like you should, maybe a couple years down the road, you should write a book about through experience. You have such a rare experience of these huge successful companies and how they've changed over the years, right? I feel like you're so uniquely positioned to be able to describe the culture of not just, Netflix, Google, Snapchat, Facebook, but also of Silicon Valley. So I'm actually so excited that, we're able to have this conversation. So I have just like two more questions. Um, First, I'm aside from Netflix, which I think you made it sound it's really unique. Most companies in Silicon Valley, and I think around the world, they have some version of a performance review cycle, right? And what that means is, every maybe 6 months or so, you get an evaluation, and your manager will tell you, here's what you did well, here's what you could have improved on. Your colleagues or your peers will talk about you. So I'm wondering, how do you think about, like, at one extreme, you could really optimize for performance review. I'm going to do a project which will look good on performance review and get a good rating, get a good compensation increase. On the other extreme, you could be focused on projects that you really care about, but they may not directly ladder up to a company or organization initiative, but you care about it, you're passionate about it. And so you put your head down and just work on that. So I'm wondering, based on your experience at these companies, where are you on that spectrum of really optimizing for performance review versus maybe perhaps being more longer term?
Yeah, I feel like if I want to enjoy my daily work, I should never think too much about performance review. It's really hard to deliver something you're not passionate about. You can't be fully yourself, and that's what you mentioned. Like, people in Silicon Valley don't work like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. They work as much as is needed. Sometimes it could be shorter, sometimes it's longer, but it's because they know they need to do something important. And I think if you just start focusing about like performance review, all this PC stuff, you forget what's actually important, what's important for you and what's important for the company. And PSC is formality. And I think it's hard also to make it perfect.
And when you say PSC, just I think some people may not be aware.
Sorry.
PSC is like a Facebook terminology for the performance review cycle.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm used to this kind of slang. Performance review. Like, I don't think you should optimize. I think good companies where they thought through to make performance review reflect the actually good employer. A good employee should be evaluated great. If not, there's something wrong with performance review, and that should be fixed in that particular company. And I think most of Silicon Valley have relatively good performance review, especially my current company. I think it's pretty honest. And overall, I feel that they're important to do like things you're passionate about. Try to do things that really you think is the right thing to do. And try to ask your manager, and if you have reports as well, like how it can help you be successful. I think this is very important. Like, you want other people to be successful. And if you want to be successful, then you always should under-promise and over-deliver. This is like very important because your manager have probably some promises based on what you promised to him or her. So if you under-deliver, then you actually make your manager not successful. And of course, at the end of the day, you make the product not very good, right? So always prepare other people for potential problems, prepare yourself. So, and be persistent. Like, also, this is very important, I think, especially in Silicon Valley. If you promise something, try hard, but you should do this. You should do this. Next time, you will not kill yourself, but you will just add extra buffer in your promises and your timeline estimations, right? But if you gave your word, I think that was why many managers respected me in Silicon Valley. If you had told something I will do, I can procrastinate. I'm not always like perfect employee. I can do other things, but when it's like already time goes short on what my promise is, I work hard. I can work until like 2 a.m. something, but I will deliver. I will deliver what I promised. And that's very important kind of quality.
I love that. Yeah, what I've heard, what you said earlier, and the advice I received is the best way to make yourself look good is make the people around you look good. Which I think that's amazing advice. And ideally, the company's performance review cycle should show people who are doing that. And that should be aligned with the long-term incentive for both you and the company. That's how it should work out. So I think that makes a lot of sense, what you said. And then one more question before we kind of start wrapping up. I'm wondering, you've obviously entered into a bunch of companies. And what that means is you also entered into a bunch of different architectures, code bases. How do you learn quickly? How do you ramp up quickly on a brand new technical architecture and also people architecture, right? Like the organizational, like who's important, who do you need to talk to? How do you ramp up quickly, technically and organizationally?
Yeah, second part, I would say I'm really bad in.
Okay.
I think only now I realize that, yeah, your question is very good. I never thought about this, but you're right. Like, you need to realize what are important stakeholders. Could be like engineers, management. You need to know with whom you need to build relationship. And I was very direct. I was only building relationship with people with whom I need to work. And it's not probably always works, because sometimes people who make decisions are not people that with you directly communicate. So that's very important. And I'm only now probably starting to recognize that, yeah, you need to think about this and spend time with people, because people only do things they want to do. They never do things outside that they want to do. You can push them to want this thing because like different aspects, but it's better for them to inspire them to do this. This is for you or for your team or for others. So it's definitely important to build relationship, especially in America, in Silicon Valley, where it's all about small talk. It's all about connections, ice breaking. That's definitely important part. And to be successful as an engineer, for example, I feel the biggest thing, in addition to persistence, which I already told a lot, is actually to learn. You need to learn new things, like focus on learning new things, new architecture, read the trends, think of different points of view. And if you have some ideas, always try to change them. Bring them to like design review, to your peers, and always search for opposite points of view. Like if you search for supporters of your architecture, you will never come with the best one. Always search for like tractions there. So learn new things. Try to also work hard in searching the problem. And I think that's important, especially in Silicon Valley, to always be active in trying to solve the problem. You search internet, you ask peers. They don't know, ask your manager. Don't be passive, always be proactive. Try to communicate, always over communicate and then under communicate. Silicon Valley is all about moving fast, and your manager is usually your best friend in terms of like accelerating things and helping to unblock you, all this stuff. So be very active in terms of communication, unblocking yourself and finding correct people, as you mentioned, to build relationship and help to unblock you as well.
I feel like we should probably have a part two. There's just literally hours more of stuff that I'd love to kind of pick your brain about and talk to you about. But I wonder, as we wrap up, what else do you want to share? Any advice or thoughts that you want to leave with the folks watching?
I think first advice that I thought about is never focus on money. I think that's very important, and that's a mistake that I did for years. I said, like my first salary was $280 a month, and I thought, okay, $280 a month is like $3,000 a year. That kind of salary I had, and I thought, okay, when I will get $500 a month, I would be happy. So my correlation of happiness in this world was completely built on top of my kind of compensation. And yeah, when I got check, it happened maybe within like 6 months. I got $500, a kind of notice of salary increase in the letter. I was really happy, but my happiness lasts. How do you think how long it lasts?
Probably it wears off after maybe a couple of weeks, right?
No, it actually lasted like 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, I realized, okay, I'm actually $500 a month I'm earning, right? Like pretty good. Okay, what's next?
Yeah.
Right. So I think there should be something much bigger than like your compensation and your success. Even like your title is not important. Whether you find this to be like spiritual person, whether you try to make the world a better place, where you help other people to grow and learn. For example, like what you're doing now, I think is fantastic. Like you graduated from Stanford and now you try to like use everything Stanford allowed you to reach in this life to share this with people there, right? That's amazing. Like I think we can get much more satisfaction in this life, not from money, but from doing the right things, doing the good things. Yes. At the end of the day, that's the only thing that will be left after we will all die. Like our money will not follow us. So I think that's a very important mistake. And I think my salary was like $750, like $100 a month. And I was always expecting next. It was always like, it went from 10 seconds to even maybe 2 seconds of happiness after like new salary increase. So I started to realize, I need to find some true passions. And like, if, for example, this interview will be useful for at least anyone, and someone will leave the comment and say like, oh, that was actually, I knew something new for me and it was useful, I will get much more satisfaction that next salary increase. It will last much more than 2 seconds for sure. So I think, please don't follow my mistake. Don't think about money as the biggest motivator in like your decisions about the life. That I think is important for me. Another thing I want to share is about the believe in yourself. I think there are a lot of books that all Americans read when they are young, like Napoleon Hill, like Dale Carnegie, Stephen Covey, and only after I came in America, I realized, okay, I need to learn what actually people learn here. And for example, Napoleon Hill, like the Think and Grow Rich, I think that book is like mind blowing for me, because it basically, like, the idea of this book is very easy. You build your own reality. You will live in that reality that you build by yourself. And first, you need to build this in your dreams. So start with your dreams. Think what you want to do in this world, whom you want to be. And especially in America, like I feel like there is not much corruptions, not much limitations in America. You basically can achieve whatever you build in your dreams if you persistently follow steps to achieve this dream. So I think it's very important to, as like I was young, like, oh, I probably will never work in Google, or I will never work in like big company. And you see, like one day I realized, oh, actually I can work there. I started to interview, I failed, but my dream was to work there and try and see. So I achieved this at the end of the day. And I think this is very important to realize that there is no limits. Limits is only your beliefs and your dreams. Once you believe in something, you have dreams and you persistently following the steps there, then I think it's important and you will definitely achieve. So don't limit your dreams. That's the biggest limitation factor in this world, especially in countries that provide us opportunities to achieve anything you can do.
Yeah, and I feel like I'll add my own quick thought there. I feel like you got inspired by this book, which is amazing, and that opened up your eyes to what is possible. I think for me, surrounding yourself with people who elevate your ambition, right? That I think has been really important. Like if they can do it, or if they have ambition, I can do it. And so if you're not around people like that, find other people to be around, right? So I feel like that's like what you said, being able to dream big and think big, that's so important. And whether it's through a book or the people around you, that's critical.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I think this is the biggest point that blew me away on my first business trip to America. Honestly speaking, in Russia, like all our government or like kind of mass media creates pretty like bad kind of impression about Americans, that like fake smiles, they don't care when they ask, they don't care about you when they ask, how are you, all this stuff. So I was not expecting much from Americans. I thought like this is just a successful country in terms of economics, but people are not very good. And my business trip there, I think there were a few stories, but one story that's really like, I will never probably forget. I came to some island. I really was interested in deers. I like nature, all this stuff. And I read on the internet there are deers in this particular small island. It was like Washington State near Seattle. And I traveled there and I saw the woman who was staying on the lake and just maybe enjoying the lake view or something like this. And I asked like, and imagine like the woman, maybe she was like in her 50s or 60s, enjoying the lake, and then some weird person with like Russian accent, very direct, immature approach, and asked like, oh, I'm sorry, do you know where can I find deers? And now I realize it all sounds very crazy, but her approach to me, her attitude to me was unique. I think I never experienced this before. She actually answered my question the way that she was staying there and waiting for this question. And she spent, I think, 15 minutes with me trying to find deers. We finally found some rabbits, but she was really trying to help from her heart. And this is important to realize that there are many people, I think it's in many countries, but especially in America, where I think many people don't need to care about like earning enough money to eat some food, all this stuff. A lot of people just want to do the good things. And as you mentioned, like if you want to be successful, the easiest thing is just approach successful people and ask like, oh, can you share me, like, can you give me some advice? Can you share me what made you successful? And it's surprisingly how many people actually do this. People really help to each other, and the level of actually, as you mentioned, also the language. Like the language in America is very informal. You just say you, right? You, and that's all. It could be your best friend, or it could be your just stranger that you just met on the street, and that provides a lot of opportunities. Very powerful that you are on the same almost language with your stranger as you are with your family member. And that breaks a lot of walls. So like approaching people on the street in America is very normal. Asking them anything, like maybe don't ask to be friends from the very beginning, but you can ask advices and everything, and they will spend time. And several times during this first business trip, I found like people ready to invest their time just to help me. To weird stranger with weird accent, they will probably never meet in their entire life. They just want to help. And I think that's very powerful. And in addition to people, especially if you are outside of America and you want to go there, I do recommend books. There are a lot of books that will help you understand the culture, the people. It's not about just interviews. It's also about understanding like how to be successful. Mm-hmm. And there are amazing authors that I already mentioned, like Stephen Covey, like Dale Carnegie. If you think about leadership, like John Maxwell is amazing. There are so many amazing books that I actually really enjoy reading, and they give me a lot of realizations about this country, what is driving those people. And think about people that they're good. Like if you think that, oh, people around me are corrupted, they're bad, you will live in this kind of environment. But if you just think about people that they're positive, they want to help, they want to make the world a better place, you will surround yourself with such people and you will end up in such environment.
This is really, I'm inspired, Igor. I think you've inspired a lot of people who are watching. If people want to learn more about you, where can they, I'll leave links in the description for this video. Where can people learn more about your journey and your path?
Yeah, actually, many people approach me on LinkedIn. They ask me like advices, ask me to recommend them, give contacts, everything. And I'm always happy to help. So I would say LinkedIn is the easiest way to approach me. I'm checking every day, and yeah, I'm happy if I can help anyone in this world. I think I did something good.